Hey everyone, welcome to the very first YouTube episode of Read, Watch, Play. I'm Ian Savage of the NBS podcast. This is just going to be my solo effort for now. I really wanted to be able to do something for you guys, just to keep everybody engaged, and especially since our episodes on the podcast have been not including the Read, Watch, Play segment for quite some time. We still thought it would be fun to do, and um, I took the route of just wanting to, the initiative of wanting to do this for everybody and for myself, really, because I think it's fun. So, with that being said, every other rewatch play episode now, instead of being on our episodes, like I said, they're going to be coming out once a month. I'm going to be talking about, as it says in the title, Read, Watch, Play. I'm going to be talking about a book that I've read this month, or each month rather, something that I've been watching, whether it be film or television related, maybe on streaming services as well, and then also a video game that I've been playing. So, I guess we'll just get things started. Why not? As awkward as it can be. So, this month, or I guess this is December now, and for the month of November, I read Dune, or I finished Dune rather, by Frank Herbert. It's a, you know, what to say about it? It is an okay book. I wanted to read it because I'm a big sci-fi fan and fantasy fan. And, I'm working on a book, as I've talked about before on the podcast, if you're a frequent listener. And it's in the very similar vein to something like Dune. It's, science fantasy. And because Dune and Frank Herbert have such an infamy, surrounding Herbert himself, and then the book being the highest selling sci-fi novel ever, at least to this date, I obviously wanted to approach it. And so what I found was that I can see, I'm sympathetic to the idea that it is this best-selling sci-fi novel. I can see why. However, there are things about it that I just find a little, not off-putting, but I don't know. It's hard to say this just coming from, I'm nowhere near a literary critic, but it's almost amateurish. Yeah, I know it's his first major selling book that he wrote. He worked in journalism before, Frank Herbert, and obviously he wrote other books in the series, and then his son followed after him. And I'm sure that his writing got better over time. But let's just get into it. I think that it sort of comes off as a YA novel a little bit. The main character, Paul Atreides, is, this young man, maybe 17 to 19. I'm not exactly sure of his age. I can't remember if it said earlier on in the book. And he sort of leads this revolution. The book, it's he calls it a jihad. There's some obvious links to Middle Eastern culture and religion that Herbert tries to make. I don't know how well it comes off at times. Sometimes it's a little stilted, but I know he tried to do his research as best as he could. There's a lot of words lifted from Arabic and from other Islamic culture bits there. I'm sorry, if I'm not getting that exactly right. But long story short, Paul, he eventually joins with these natives to the planet Arrakis, which is where the Dune name comes from. That's the common, colloquial name for the planet. And, he meets up with this young woman. They sort of fall in love. It's not exactly clear. And, he causes this revolution, or starts this revolution rather, where, his family was given control of this planet. Then his father was killed, and many of his allies were killed off. And this rival family came to take over the planet. And then Paul tried to basically take revenge with the native peoples to, again, lead this revolution. So, with this summary in mind, the things that I really didn't care for was mainly the prose. I thought that it was, again, stilted was that came across in my mind quite often. Came off as unnatural. Within a lot of the early chapters. First of all, the chapters aren't numbered. In my edition, I have the Penguin Galaxy Collection edition of Dune that came out. I believe it was 2019 when they published it, and it just, a lot, like I said, a lot of the, what I was about to say rather was that a lot of the early chapters, at least in the first two parts, chapters have characters with multiple, rather, there are multiple perspectives in each chapter. And that can come across as slightly confusing. The inner thoughts of characters are defined by italicized prose, and which is fine, but that still makes it a little bit more difficult when we've got other people's thoughts coming in there. Largely the book is third person omniscient. And so that, I don't know, it's just not my taste. And so that's something that I would prefer for it not to be. Obviously, like it's Frank Herbert wrote the book because the way he did it, because he wanted to write it that way. So, but it just doesn't really come across very well for me. And then again, on the YA notions that I mentioned before, the character of Paul, I don't know, like as a 30-year-old, he doesn't exactly come across as relatable to me. He gets angry often at things that I wouldn't never get angry at. And then later on, without getting into spoiler territory, there were some other deaths within his immediate family that, Frank Herbert is telling us that he's angry, but he doesn't actually feel angry about. And so it's slightly confusing, the direction that he chose to go that way with it. Other than that, the book has some interesting elements. It obviously has some sci-fi spectacle with sandworms and the ecology of the planet Arrakis and the multiple warring families that are involved. Really only focuses on two, sort of three, but the Atreides family, which Paul is of, and the Harkonnens, which are sort of the quote unquote bad guys. Obviously, it's not that simple. There's a lot that the book goes into that even the early David Lynch film doesn't go into at all. And I suspect the Denis Villeneuve adaptation that was supposed to come out by this time this year, that's now been delayed until October of next year, I suspect he'll try to go into it a little bit better than the Lynch version. But it is still a movie, and obviously there are things that you have to gloss over, although I do think he's wanting to do a two-parter. I'm a big fan of Denis Villeneuve, and his films like Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Sicario, Prisoners, all those are fantastic films. And so I suspect he'll do the book justice. But I think that'll be largely the as much as he could do, is basically bringing it into his sort of vision, that sort of brutalistic, realistic approach that he takes with his movies. Dune, when reading it, doesn't really come off that way. It does come off as more fantasy than it does sci-fi. You can obviously see all of the influences that other sci-fi took from Dune, largely Star Wars, whether it be the Force or Tatooine or this young man with, a biblical name, things like that. Overall, though, I mean, I'm not really in the nature of reviewing things specifically, but if I were to give Dune, this book, it's a hefty one. It was 623 pages, this edition. If I were to give it a score, out of 10, maybe, I'd give it about a 6 to a light 7. And it was perfectly fine. But it's definitely not as exciting as I thought it would be. It's a dated book. What I said about the prose specifically, it was written in the 1960s, or published in the 1960s at least. And, just the flavor of writing at that time, that sort of era around sci-fi there, it all had that sort of fantastical flair to it, in the prose, and it just doesn't come across that well today, as I'm sure it did back in the day. And sorry if that upsets Dune fans, but anyway, so it was an okay read, but I look forward to reading other things next month. So the next thing I want to talk about is watching. So let's see, I watched a lot this month. Well, last month of November, watched a new series, new season of The Crown, on Netflix. Fairly good show. The actors this time around are great. In season 4, Olivia Colman is fantastic as ever. Helena Bonham Carter is great, fantastic actress, and specifically Gillian Anderson as not Theresa May, but Margaret Thatcher. And I mean, she just does an excellent job in basically anything that she does. Gillian Anderson, I'm a huge fan of hers. Gorgeous woman too, by the way. Let's see, what else have I watched? As far as films go, my wife and I watched The Portrait of a Lady on Fire, French film about a painter in the, I think it's the late 1600s, 17th century. And it's about this young woman, who was said to be married off to some young aristocrat, or probably older than her aristocrat in Milan. I believe Milan is in Italy. Correct me if I'm wrong, listeners or watchers, viewers. YouTube thing is fun. And, but in order to really sell this young woman, basically, to this young aristocrat, her mother rather has a painter come to paint her portrait in order to like show how extravagant and beautiful that she is. And this young woman who's meant to be painted, have her portrait painted, as had a death in the family recently, and she doesn't like posing for paintings. But this woman painter who comes to paint her portrait has very much a large sway on her personality wise. There's some erotic and romantic interests that come between them as far as tension goes, and it's a really great film. I mean, the cinematography was pretty fantastic, the lighting in it as well, and the acting was pretty top notch. And I would recommend this film to anyone who likes really great art films, not just about art, but high art films. Don't be spooked by subtitles. It is subtitled with French dub, obviously. And that should never dissuade anyone. I know sometimes it's hard for people to watch films with subtitles, but you just need to get through a few of them, and you start to get used to reading as you're watching. Trust me, I watch a lot of Japanese animation, and I had to get used to the subtitles for a long time, but now I'm right there, and I can enjoy films of other and shows of other internationalities, to put it lightly. So with that being said, those are some great things to watch if you're interested in. And let's see, for the last thing, playing. Well, it's probably no surprise if anybody who's been listening to the podcast knows I've been playing a lot of Hunt Showdown on the PlayStation. It's a great first-person shooter from Crytek. It's sort of a battle royale, but sort of not. Multiplayer, PvP, PvE, high tension, and high thrill, high risk, high reward, that sort of thing. It's not like Warzone. It's not like Fortnite, any of those battle royales. It has its own unique flavor to it. And I'd highly recommend it to anyone willing to give a higher challenge a bit of a try. I think if I were to compare it to anything, it'd be more like Escape from Tarkov, another first-person shooter, sort of survival game as well, on the PC. The other things that I've been playing as well is I just finished The Last Guardian on PS4, an exclusive PlayStation title from Team ICO. That was in the works for a long time after Team ICO made Shadow of the Colossus, which is a cult classic in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion. And The Last Guardian, I will say that it just, while it was interesting, the world was interesting, the relationship between the boy and the beast named Trico, in case I won't give a synopsis of it because it's a little bit too convoluted to do that here, but the relationship between the boy and Trico is interesting. The gameplay itself is rather limited and clunky, and while I did enjoy my time playing it and learning, engaging in the experience of the relationship between the boy and the beast, it just wasn't amazing. And it's not surprising because the Shadow of the Colossus was so good. I never played their original game Eco. I own it for the PlayStation 3 remaster, but I never did step into it because I could only really think about Shadow of the Colossus at the time when that came out. I believe it was in 2011 or 2012 when that remake came out, but I can't remember. But this The Last Guardian that came out, I believe it was in 2016 or 2017. Maybe it was 2018. I'm not sure, but as I said, I just finished it, and it's sad to say that I immediately sold it. I traded it in afterwards because it just didn't leave that big of an impact on me, not nearly as much as Shadow of the Colossus. And it's sort of sad because the Last Guardian lives within that shadow, and it's a tough game to sell when your previous iteration on that style of game is so prolific. So, with that being said, everyone, thank you for watching Read, Watch, Play, and I look forward to seeing you all next month when I talk about some more great things, and I hope that these recommendations are treat you well and reach you fast. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye, folks.